All right, so today we're really diving deep into something that's, well, it's kind of a life or death matter when you think about it.
Yeah, no kidding. Safety, especially around heavy machinery, that's not something to mess around with.
Exactly. And we're focusing on a very specific area this time. Um, the guards you see on power transmission systems,
Yeah.
like, conveyor belts, those sorts of things.
Right, the stuff most people probably wouldn't even notice, let alone think could be dangerous.
And that's kind of the point, right? We're pulling info from PowerSafe Automation. It's this website, like their whole thing is industrial safety.
So we're going to break down what are the hazards people face working around these systems and how do those guards actually, well, keep them safe.
That's it. We're talking real world stuff here, not just like theory. How do these things actually function? And more importantly, why they're absolutely essential in a factory setting.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about rotating parts. Anything that spins. Those are pretty obvious danger zones, right? Oh, yeah, definitely. And OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they have a whole bunch of rules about this, like a whole standard 1910.219. It's all dedicated to this.
Right. So OSHA's saying, hey, this stuff is serious. And one thing they really focus on is these things called end shafts. It's like,
Mm.
imagine you've got a powered conveyor and the shaft that makes it go around, it sticks out a bit too far, or maybe the keyways, those little slots in the shaft, have like rough edges. Well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you get clothing caught on that, or worse, somebody could get cut bad. And the solution, they're actually pretty simple. These things called end shaft bearing covers. They just like enclose the dangerous part.
So kind of like putting a lid on a blender keeps those blades from turning your hand into, well.
Exactly. And it's not just the end of the shaft either. Think about those bearings, things like pillow blocks. You see them on all sorts of equipment, jib cranes, big fans, even rolling mills. Same problem, that bearings spinning, it's got to be covered. Otherwise, it's a huge risk for pulling someone in or getting something wrapped around it. What's crazy is how, a tiny little part, something most people wouldn't even think twice about, can suddenly turn into like a major hazard.
Right. Like it really makes you stop and think about all the potential accidents waiting to happen in places you wouldn't even consider. Now, let's shift gears a bit. What about those areas with pumps and motors, especially the ones dealing with like oil and hydraulic fluid? Those seem particularly tricky.
Oh, absolutely. That's where coupling covers come in. See, these couplings, they connect rotating shafts and they can turn into, well, imagine like a giant pair of scissors or a crusher. You get caught in there, it's not going to be pretty. So, full encasement is the only way to go, especially when you've got slippery surfaces, oil spills, that kind of thing. One slip and you could be in serious trouble.
Yeah, doesn't sound fun at all. And obviously, anything moving at high speed, that's got to be a major concern, right?
Oh, huge, huge. Think about chains, all kinds of belts, drive chains on machines, conveyor belts moving things around, V belts, timing belts, all of those. They're whipping around so fast, it's incredible. You wouldn't want to get anywhere near them without chain and belt covers. I mean, getting tangled up in that, that's a nightmare scenario.
So we've got covers for shafts, bearings, couplings, chains, belts, a lot of stuff to keep track of.
Yeah.
But what about those really big components, the ones you can't easily take apart for maintenance or even to put a guard on? The PowerSafe Automation folks mentioned something called split shaft covers. What are those all about?
Yeah, those are pretty clever, actually. When you've got these massive pieces of equipment like giant bearings or those big sprocket hubs, taking them apart every time you need to work on them, that's a pain. So these split covers, they basically clamp around the shaft in two halves. You get the protection you need without having to completely disassemble the whole thing. You gotta love practical solutions that, like, actually work in the real world?
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, the conveyors themselves, those long stretches with all those moving parts, those got to be a challenge to guard too.
Oh, for sure. And it can't just be like a section here or there. You need full conveyor covers running the whole length, whether it's a straight run or all curved and winding. Otherwise, someone could reach over, get pulled in by the belt, trapped, you name it. The hazard's continuous, so the solution has to be continuous too. And even something like a take-up bearing, the thing that adjusts the belt tension, even that needs a cover. It might seem like a small part, but it's still rotating, still a potential hazard.
All right, so let's move on to something called nip points. Now, I'm not familiar with that term. What are those exactly?
So a nip point, it's basically that pinch point where two things come together, right? It could be two rollers or a roller and a belt, but it creates this like a very small gap. And that gap, man, that's where the danger is. You get a finger, a hand, even a limb caught in there. It can crush, trap, really bad stuff. PowerSafe Automation, they really emphasize the need for nip guards, both for idler rollers and powered rollers. And the key thing, they say, is the clearance, right? You need at least 50 millimeters of space, or if you're talking about the gap, it can't be any bigger than 0.196 inches. This is important everywhere, from simple conveyor systems to huge printing presses, anywhere you've got those rollers and belts working together.
It's amazing how much detail goes into keeping people safe around these things. Now, what about the very ends of the conveyors where the stuff comes out? Are there special guards for those areas?
Absolutely. You need what they call drive belt and roller guards at those points, where the material comes off the conveyor or gets transferred to another system. These guards, they're like the final line of defense. They prevent all sorts of things: wrapping, pinching, pulling someone in, entanglement, the whole works. They even cover the rotating shafts that might be tucked away inside the conveyor frames you might not even see. It's all about creating this a safety zone at a high risk area.
And the return rollers, the
Yeah.
ones on the underside of the belt, the ones that aren't actually powered, do those need guarding
You
too?
bet. You'd think they'd be safe, right? But think about it. The belt's still moving, even on the return side. So if those rollers are within reach, let's say anything less than 7 feet off the ground, and they don't have enough clearance built in, yeah, they need to be guarded. It's not as obvious, but someone could still get a hand or a foot tangled in there, pulled in, even crushed. It's a good reminder that even those seemingly harmless parts can be dangerous.
To really drive home this point about safety, PowerSafe Automation uses the example of a rotary airlock machine. What's so special about that?
Oh man, that one's a good illustration of what can go wrong if you don't take these guarding principles seriously. Rotary airlocks, they have all sorts of rotating parts inside, and if those aren't properly guarded, you're talking about some very serious injuries: cuts, shears, even amputations. It's scary stuff.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just about following some rules, this is about preventing people from getting hurt, badly hurt.
So let's take a step back and look at the big picture. We've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about guarding rotating shafts, all kinds of bearings, couplings, chains, belts, the entire length of conveyors, and those tricky nip points. And it seems like the overarching theme here is preventing those really awful accidents, those pull in, wrap, pinch, shear, crush, entanglement kind of things. Like this whole system of safeguards designed to keep people out of harm's way.
Exactly. It's about layers of protection, not just relying on one thing, but having multiple safeguards in place to make sure people can work around these powerful machines without, risking their limbs or even their lives.
This deep dive into power transmission and conveyor safety, it really opens your eyes to how many hidden dangers there are in seemingly ordinary industrial equipment. It makes you think, right? In how many other everyday systems are there similar risks lurking just beneath the surface? And what can we do to be more aware of those hazards, even in places we wouldn't normally think of as dangerous? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with us. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.